Check the chains. Told me that you had already. You had begun.
All right. Welcome to the Big Payback on Truth High Definition Radio. My name is Orion Meadows, and my co-host is Robert Red Ross, who is not here today. He had a few things that are occupying his time at the present moment, but I am here today. And there are a few things that I want to talk about. Obviously, we just had the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Monday, we had a big event at the Institute for Nonviolence Chicago. We always hold an event observing Dr. King. For those who have been listening, then you all know that I'm employed there at the Institute for Nonviolence Chicago, and I am the nonviolence trainer along with Professor Benny Lee. So what we do is we teach and instruct people on the 6 principles, 6 steps, and the beloved community model of Dr. King's philosophy of nonviolence. And it's something that we believe that if everyone were to embrace, then we wouldn't have a utopia, but we would have a more civilized society, because each person would respect each other's person's space and right to exist as a human being, right? So I want to start it off with that, but there are a few interesting things that people don't know about our history here in the United States. When I say ours, I'm referring to, well, people that we call African Americans, black, whatever label that you want to use. People prefer different things. And I had been discussing that with a few people. One was, and this is something that has occurred recently, one was the fact that Tuesday, which was the day after we observed Dr. Martin Luther King, Tuesday was Muhammad Ali Day right here in Illinois.
Yes, my boy.
Did you know that?
I didn't know it was Muhammad Ali Day.
Yeah. So Illinois celebrates Muhammad Ali Day. First state to do it. And so I actually brought that up in one of the trainings that I did, and the reason why was because I wanted to show the parallels. Because when we think of Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, people like that, we always look at the disparities, right? The differences between the two. And a lot of times, a lot of people want to separate them, put one on a pedestal, and then sometimes, look at the other as being, weaker or inferior or whatever the case may be. And it happens on both sides. You might have one group that'll say, hey, Malcolm X, the Panthers, the people who seem to be kind of like a little more radical or whatever, those are the people that they kind of like hold in high esteem. And then they look at King, the SCLC, people that came from out of the church and so forth. They kind of look at them as being passive. And then vice versa. You got one group that look at the Black Panthers as being too militant with the Nation of Islam. Some people look at them as being racist, not really understanding really the psychology behind any of those things. And so by Malcolm and Muhammad being on one side of the spectrum, and then Martin and the SCLC and Rosa and some of those other people on the other side, that's what they look at. And it's almost like you have to choose a side, not understanding that the similarities that a lot of them had, right? Regardless of their religious preferences or whatever.
I even could like say that even Muhammad Ali would be in the middle of the spectrum, because though he had Islamic beliefs that was viewed as racist, he was also very nonviolent. I mean, he boxed, but he wasn't trying to go to Vietnam to fight. Like,
right.
He He
Right.
wasn't trying to promote war. He was just trying
Right.
to take care of his people.
Right. Yeah, conscientious objective. And so I used him as an example. I talked about, first, I mentioned Muhammad Ali Day because most people don't know, right? So I wanted just to bring that to light. But then the fact that if you were to study Dr. King's philosophy of nonviolence, Muhammad Ali would actually be compatible with that in many ways.
Right.
For, besides him being a boxer, and that was because it was a sport, right? He competed. And I mean, I still have my own opinions about certain sports that have like a lot of physical contact, because we saw what happened with the young man that ended up in the hospital,
That's
right?
scary.
Yeah, that's very scary. And so when I was in prison, there was a guy that died playing football in the yard.
What?
Yeah.
How?
But see, that's the thing. When you with a contact sport like that, the human body is such an enigma that it is both very resilient and yet fragile at the same time.
Right.
Just think about how much it can endure, but then something small could cripple you or even take your life. Right. So it has that. How could I say? For lack of a better word, dichotomy within it. Right. Is that it's very resilient and it can endure a lot of things, and yet at the same time it's fragile. Something small, but be the end of your life, or have you where you're disabled and so forth.
Yeah.
And so that's why we should never take anything for granted in life. I try, even though I work out and things like that, even when I'm working out, I'm mindful now because I saw people get injured working out. All of that. So I learned throughout time, from me hurting myself and doing things, to myself lifting weights, watching other people hurt themselves. And most of the time, the people, not all the time, because sometimes you have people do some real ridiculous things. When I was on the weight pile, right, I saw some stupid stuff happen, and was like, I knew that was going to happen. Like I was actually not waiting for that to happen because you're just an idiot. Why would you do that? But I also saw guys hurt themselves doing things that they did every day. Like it was regular routine stuff, and it was just the wrong day, and freak accident happened. So now I'm mindful of that. Like, hey, it doesn't take much to get hurt and to damage yourself. So I'm always, mindful of things like that when I'm lifting weights, or just regular body movements. I pull muscles just getting out the bed sometimes, doing something like, so I'm aware of that. But when it comes to a sport such as football, boxing, things like that, then the likelihood or the possibility of something like that increases. I watched when I was in prison, I was watching the news, and it was right here in the Chicago area. I can't remember exactly where, but there were these guys, they were in a club or a little bar or whatever, and they were, joking around. And so there was a wager, they made a bet. They were like, I think it was like $5, $10, something, real meager. But they said that I bet you won't let a girl hit you in your face or whatever, sock you in your face. So they're in there having a good time, joking around. You know how people are in those bars and stuff. So they approached a woman and they told her about the bet. And they're, okay, yeah. So she punched her one time, killed her.
That's dead.
Yeah. Of course, she obviously got charged with a crime, because she did kill him. It wasn't premeditated, but your actions did result in the loss of a life.
Yeah.
So now she got a record, all because of it was a little joke, right? And people play all the time, stuff like that. But that's an example. The guy lost his life over that. And so when you think about what happened to the young man that played for, what was the Bills? Was it? What?
I
think it was the Buffalo Bills.
I think it was the Bills.
Yeah, they played for the Bills.
Lamar.
Yeah. When you think about what happened to him
Lamar.
and how long, think about this, right? How many people play sports? How long football and those other very physical contact sports have been around? It actually makes you think, like, makes you wonder why that is something that doesn't happen on a more regular basis, right?
Right.
You know, and so that is scary. That to watch that, and then we've had other incidents before, right? Not that exact incident, but we've had people be paralyzed and you know, that from playing football. So it's not like, hey, you know, we don't know that this is a dangerous sport. It's just that, and then we're not even talking about the CTE.
Yeah, concussions.
Yeah, and stuff like that. Dave Duerson from the Bears that won the football, when they won the championship, the Super Bowl, he had an issue. He had some stuff going on, and he ended up taking his life. And even I saw in one documentary or whatever with Jim McMahon, who was the quarterback for the Bears then, he was talking to the guy Dave Duerson, and he was telling him about what was going on in his head. And so shortly after that, Jim McMahon began having those symptoms. You know, when he ended up having some type of surgery or whatever. But he talked about that. But yeah, so when you're dealing with those kind of sports, and then obviously no one knows for sure, but Muhammad Ali, even we were talking about before, it's Parkinson's.
That was crazy.
You know, some people believe that was a result of him taking too many hits in that ring, right? Now, what's ironic is that I actually read one of his books, and he talked about how he did not play why he didn't play football. He said he was like, I didn't like getting hit.
Wow.
And then this was his reasoning behind it. He said, I'd rather box than play football, because if I play football, I know I gotta get hit. In boxing, the objective is to not get hit. It's to not get hit. And so when people talk about Floyd Mayweather and how, you know, sometimes it's not entertaining, it's boring watching him, but Muhammad Ali even said it himself. He said that the objective as a boxer is to not get hit.
Right.
You know, but in football, you know you're going to get hit eventually down the line, unless you're a punter, and then, you know, sometimes that happens even. But the objective is to not get hit, is what Muhammad Ali said. Not saying that you will never get hit, you know that you will, but you trying to avoid getting hit.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah, but Muhammad Ali, going back to him, and even though he was a boxer, that was a competitive sport. He wasn't trying to like hurt anyone. Obviously, because it's a sport, someone is going to get hurt somewhat, right? So you know, but not maliciously to like if you were to in the street catch a person and beat them down, you know, you're trying to win, so that involves hurting someone to a certain extent. But as a person outside of the sport is what I'm referring to, and you know, dealing with his character and so forth, because he was a conscientious objector. He ended up a conscientious objector to the war, and here's the parallel. So was King.
Yeah.
You know, King was against the war, I should say, as well. He sacrificed. He lost his title. Obviously, it resulted in him losing some money, and he went to jail. King went to jail, you know, for his beliefs, sacrifice, and so forth. So that's what I mean. Even though they may have had different religious beliefs, and even about race to a certain extent, and that was in the beginning with the Nation of Islam. You know, he began to change a little bit, but then even understanding the context and the things that were being articulated, if you can understand, any white person any white person that is really willing to look at the times, what they were, if you were to put yourself in a black person's shoes, the way that the Nation of Islam was thinking at that time was not wrong, right? Like, it's, huh?
I think they were just most like trying to flip brothers.
Well, see, even to feel a certain way though, like where the white man, is the devil, blah blah blah, this and that. If a white person were to truly look at their black experience during those times, it's understandable how they could come to that conclusion. Why they would have that type of rhetoric and ideology, right? Because if you look at the devil, what's supposed to be the devil, all those attributes, not all white people, but we're talking about that civilization, that system, right, of imperialism and so forth.
Yeah.
That is like an embodiment of the devil or a satanic force, right? So for them to come to that conclusion is not like really bogus within the context of the black experience, right? Hey, how you guys doing? So my name is Orion Metals. For those of you who are joining, and we are, this is the Big Payback at Truth High Definition Radio. Also, I am live on the ILCHEP, which is the Illinois Coalition for Higher Education in Prisons, Instagram, and also on the Wisdom app. And we are just basically talking about black history, certain things that are not taught or misunderstood, because we began talking about King, and right now we're talking about Muhammad Ali, and instead of the differences, actually the similarities, the correlation between Muhammad Ali and King. But not just that, we're going to get into some other people as well.
And also, if you would like to call in, the number is 872-529-5289.
Say that again.
The number is 872-529-5289. Y'all can call and ask questions, comments, or join the discussion.
Right, you can join the discussion, definitely. So, but yeah, so you got to be able to understand that, right? Now, I myself, I don't believe any of that, but I kind of understand the rhetoric, right? If you're looking at it in a figurative sense, it's not a literal sense. And then we see that, people, they evolve. I evolved in my understanding, and we're still evolving. As long as you keep an open mind and you're existing, you're going to evolve. You're going to advance in life. So we ended up seeing a lot of those guys, even Malcolm X, the guy who Muhammad Ali looked up to, had begun to evolve before he died. And the trajectory that he and Martin were on. Now, you got to think about this. Because Martin, there were certain things that Martin didn't talk about or speak out openly as much, that he began to address a little more. So when you look at the trajectory, they were, instead of them going a separate way, it actually looked like they were heading toward the same direction. And it's unfortunate that both of them were taken out. And I think they were both the same age, or close to the.
They were close.
They were like 39. I think they both were 39 because Malcolm was a little older than Martin. So they were like, I'm almost certain they were both 39 years old when they were assassinated. But even so, moving forward, let's talk about. There was someone else that I had talked about, or a fact that a lot of people didn't know that I had brought up, related to, or connected to Martin Luther King, civil rights movement, and so forth. Did you know Martin Luther King's mother was assassinated?
I didn't know that his mother was assassinated.
His mother was assassinated. His mother was assassinated, I believe, 6 years after Martin. Now that's a fact that's not taught to us.
When I was reading.
Yeah, Martin Luther King's mother was assassinated. Now, there was a guy, he was a black Hebrew Israelite. He didn't like Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And his intention was to kill Martin's father.
Right.
But she was closer, so he killed her. Yeah, Martin Luther King's mother was assassinated, and I just learned that like last year.
That was a pure accident coincidence.
Huh?
That was just a pure accident.
No.
Because there was some intention for the father, but.
Yeah, but she was closer, so he got,
Circumstance, I should say, not coincidence.
Yeah, that wasn't coincidence because that was intention. That was premeditated. He went in there and with the intention of killing King's father, and obviously because you know who he was, right? But he killed the mother, you know, in his eyes close enough. But that's another fact that's not taught to us, to most people. Probably most people don't know that Martin Luther King's mother was assassinated. So, let's see. Percy Julian was another person I brought up.
Percy Julian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't know who Percy Julian is?
I heard of the name.
Have you ever heard of Julian High School?
Yeah.
Okay, this is my point. Percy Julian. Google Percy Julian for me. So we're on the Illinois Coalition for Higher Education in Prisons Instagram and Wisdom app. This is very educational right now. This information that we're getting that has, for some reason, I don't like to use the word withheld because it's out there, but it's not something that is like promoted or encouraged to be taught. And especially right here in Illinois, if nowhere else, the knowledge about Percy L. Julian should be known. He was I'm going to let you tell us about Percy Julian. What did you find on Google?
So, this is interesting. Percy LeVon Julian was an American researcher.
You got to speak up.
Yeah. Percy LeVon Julian was an American research chemist and a pioneer in the chemical synthesis of medicinal drugs from plants. It seems that he was finding usage from soybeans.
They gotta hear you.
He was the first to synthesize the natural product. I can't even say that.
It doesn't matter, but just go
he
ahead.
made a natural product and was pioneering the industrial large-scale chemical synthesis of the human hormones, testosterone, progesterone from plant steroids. He was making pills. He laid the foundation of steroid drug industry's production for cortisone, other corticosteroids, and birth control pills. Huh. Great that.
And he had his own company, which they tried to sabotage.
Yeah, they said there's some interesting facts. He came up with many clever uses of soybeans. His economic achievement brought cortisone to the people. He started his own company and he was a worldwide activist.
Yep. Also, his home was bombed in Oakland.
He was making. I don't get it. Why?
His home was bombed in Oakland. They did not want him living there. And here's the parallels, right? He was an activist. And just like King and others, he had his home bombed. He was doing some things for humanity. And this is what I'm talking about. I'm not angry when we talk about Frederick Douglass. I'm not angry when we talk about Martin Luther King and we talk about Rosa Parks, right? And even Malcolm X, he has, been put out there of late. But come on, here's a person, Percy Julian. Who knows about Percy? He should have a movie. I watched a documentary on him. that story deserves a movie, right? That story deserves a movie, but we don't hear about people like that. But guess what? They're gonna put out their power and all of this other stuff because that's what sells. And I'm not knocking people, but I'm just saying like we need people that are going to put stuff like that out. So that would be very important for us. Pardon me one moment. But yeah, what do you think about that?
That's something that wasn't taught in school. That's something that I didn't expect. But what makes me upset about it is that when you have people humanitarians who does things like adopt the Savior or Percy Julian, they get so much flack and hate while they're building healthy ways of life or things that can better a human's life. Because cortisone, steroids, they're like used commonly now.
Right.
Birth control pills, come on now. They're commonly known now. Nobody knew all like
Right. And that's my point, man. We have a very long way to go. And it's we know whose fault it is, right? Why we haven't been taught this, but it's some of our own fault.
Right.
Because where are our scholars at? And this should be something that should be taught to us at a very young age. And it's been a while. I forgot. I'm going to be honest with you, but you can look this up. Simeon. Yeah, look him up. I remember I do remember when I was in grammar school. They taught us about Simeon. What about McCoy? Robert McCoy. Do you know who McCoy is?
Robert McCoy.
Now I remember that vaguely from when I was and I didn't even care then. Like I was ready to get up out of science class and history class and everything when they were talking about him. But I still was like, and a lot of people, they say that the phrase "the real McCoy" comes from that. I'm not quite sure how true that is, but that's what I heard. So look up McCoy and look up Simeon. In Simeon Vocational High School, or whatever it is. Now, what is it called now? I can't remember. Yeah, Simeon High School. It's named after him.
I'm trying to find the person. They keep bringing up the school.
Just Google who was the school named after. There you go.
Simeon Career Academy was named after teacher, administrator, and specialist in vocational education Neil Ferdinand Simeon. Mr. Simeon was born in Chicago, Illinois on May 30th, 1916, and was of Creole descent. His family was from New Orleans. His father was a cigar maker. He had 2 sisters and 3 brothers, Lillian, Ethel, Omar, Albert, and Leah. Neil F. Simeon married Helen. Into this union was born daughter Sharon A. Simeon. Mr. Simeon graduated from Doolittle Elementary School. That's crazy. That's a nasty name for a school. And went to graduate from Wendell Phillips High School in 1934, where he was football captain and valedictorian. That man was intelligent. Mr. Simeon won an academic scholarship to Northwestern University, but instead enrolled at the Illinois Institute of Technology, where he started in track and boxing. While in undergrad, he was the IIT light heavyweight champion and competed in the Golden Gloves. He received a Bachelor of Science degree in mechanical engineering from IIT in 1938 and was elected to Pi Tau Sigma, an honorary mechanical engineering fraternity.
Right. And then and you can imagine what else he also accomplished, right? For them to name a school like them, he obviously did.
Okay, here's some highlights. I'm just gonna go through it because it has some little highlights right here. So
yeah.
In 1962, Neil F. Simeon was called upon by President Kennedy to represent the United States at the International Trade Fair in Lagos, Nigeria. He was given a special leave of absence to supervise the educational and training aspects of the United States exhibit of new tools, new skills, and new markets. That's great. That's a great
Okay, McCoy. I think his first name was Robert. It's been a while, right? And I learned, like I said, I learned this in grammar school. You know, and it just came to mind. Because normally I would have gone ahead and looked it up and then had it ready, but it just came to mind. I remember McCoy was one when I was in grammar school that they used to talk about a little bit. Because my school was a little more progressive when it came to African American history or Black history, whatever you want to call it. So they kind of like encouraged us to learn about this. What do you see?
I don't. They saw a whole lot of people.
McCoy scientist. Black scientist named McCoy. That's what you put. Google black scientist named McCoy.
Okay. Is it Elijah McCoy?
Yeah, there it is, Elijah.
All right.
I don't know what made me think of Robert.
Elijah J. McCoy was a Canadian-American engineer of African-American descent who invented lubrication systems for steam engines. Born free on the Ontario shore of Lake Erie to the parents who fled enslavement in Kentucky. He traveled to the United States as a young child when his family returned in 1847, becoming a U.S. resident and citizen. His inventions and accomplishments were honored in 2012 when the United States Patent and Trademark named its first regional office in Detroit, Michigan, the Elijah J. McCoy Midwest Regional Patent Office. Let's see what he's got named. That's interesting.
Yeah. And that, think about it, the real McCoy. See, the patent, this is the real McCoy.
The real McCoy. A popular expression typically meaning the real thing has been attributed to Elijah McCoy's oil drip cup invention. One theory is that railroad engineers looking to avoid inferior copies were requested by name and inquired if a locomotive was fitted with the real McCoy system.
Mm-hmm.
This theory is mentioned in Elijah McCoy's biography at the National Inventors Hall of Fame.
And see, now, you just learned that. Why are you just learning that? And you're not a stupid person. You're an intelligent person. You're an intelligent man. But why are you just learning this?
That's crazy.
And this is what I mean, right? And okay, if outsiders, people outside of our community aren't going to teach us, okay, fine. Why aren't we teaching us this? Right? After a while, there has to be some type of accountability on our part, right? We know, okay, that there are outside forces who, you know, they don't have our best interest at heart, right?
That's crazy.
So then that means that we have to take it upon ourselves to say, you know what, we need to educate our children.
That's really. I'm sure it was for trains, or like, what was it for? Trains or cars? It was steam pressure, so I'm assuming trains. That's like, because they saying that before his invention, the train engine had to be stopped before necessary lubrication could be applied. McCoy's invention allowed engines to be lubricated while they ran, saving precious time and money. That's.
So everyone, you listening to Truth HD. See, you're getting the truth right now. Truth High Definition Radio. My name is Orion Meadows. We are live on the ILCHEP Instagram, which is Illinois Coalition for Higher Education in Prisons, as well as on the Wisdom app for ILCHEP. And we're just learning, we're talking about things that most people don't know because we are not properly informed and educated about history, and especially Black history, and Black History Month is coming up. We began talking about Dr. King and other figures and how they had similarities. Also, did you know Dr. King graduated at 15 years old?
Not 15.
Yeah, he was 15. He got his bachelor's at 19. So another fun fact right there. about Dr. King and his accomplishments, that he was an extraordinary intellectual, he was extraordinarily intellectual to even, accomplish those feats. So this is way before he even began his career as an activist, basically, right? Not to say that he didn't have it already in him. His father was was a preacher, was a reverend or whatever. But I'm just saying, like, even before he began even doing a lot of those extraordinary things that we know, or we see all the time, and we attribute to him. He was doing extraordinary things, scholastically, right? Academically. So, and these are like the role models that we want out there. People like that. Percy L. Julian, Elijah McCoy, and obviously King. I mean, think about being 15 years old, graduating at 15, getting your bachelor's by the time you were 19. It's extraordinary. And right now in our society, especially in our community, with the culture that we have, it's kind of anti-intellectual. It's shunned. It's almost like an abomination if you're smart right now.
I don't even want to go back and see the history of the city. That's what I'm looking at right now.
The history of what?
History of Chicago, the African American presence.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, DuSable, right?
That piece.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's so much, man, and that's what I mean by there's so much to uncover that's been hidden or just not put out there, and it's a war. It is a war for our minds, our hearts, and our souls right now, at this point. And we have to make a decision. We have to make a decision on what matters to us as a people. And if we don't begin to emphasize that it's important for us to learn these things about ourselves, to teach this to our children, the path that we're heading on is just going to get worse and worse and worse, right?
Yeah, you gotta know where you come from. Like the Great Migration. We had African Americans. They said right here, to Southern blacks, Chicago was the promised land, stories of big city life and jobs with good wages and housework and waters and things like that. I'm saying, like, now we have all those things that our ancestors, our past, our great grandparents has envisioned they're coming up, because some of my grandparents came from the South.
But do we have them?
We don't have them truly, but we have like what they have. Not with the wages and things, but some of the simpler things like running water and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's because society within itself, though, has advanced, right? We talk about for instance, there are a lot of things that most Americans didn't have, even those that were rich, right? At one time, there were no televisions. Right. One time you didn't have automobiles, right? At one time, you didn't have a telephone. One time there were no computers. At one time so with that being said, but when we look at the accessibility to resources, it's still disproportionate, right? Or I should say a huge disparity in accessibility to certain resources when it comes to blacks and whites. Still. Right? So our elders and ancestors fought for a society that would lean towards more equality. That's what they were fighting for, and that's what they were hoping for. And so, even though we may not be under the oppression, the same amount of oppression that our ancestors were under, we still face a lot of discrimination. We still have resources that aren't as accessible to us as they are to other groups out there. And obviously, when you look at the prison industrial complex and how many of us are incarcerated or under correctional supervision, it is greatly disproportionate. And so those are the things that we have to look at. And we can't look at some of the things that we see that are on the surface and come to a conclusion that we're so much better off, right? The world in itself, society in itself has changed, has changed a lot. But we still have these disparities. And that's what we have to look at. Those are the things that we have to consider when we're looking at where we are in society right now. So this is Truth High Definition Radio. I'm Orion Meadows. My co-host Robert Red Ross is not here today, and we're just talking about our history, Black history rather, and which is American history. We talk about a certain group of people that live in this country. So when we talk about Black history, we are talking about American history, United States history, because we have contributed so much to this country. Now think about this. Let's put it in this perspective. I talk about this, I use this analogy all the time. When you think about all of the people that were brought over here, you know, the source of labor, once it was taken out of Africa and brought over here, we see what the results of Africa, right? We see the consequences of that. What happened to Africa once a great source of labor was taken away and brought over here? And then you look at what happened and how the United States was able to prosper because that source of labor was taken away out of Africa. And then you see certain parts of Africa either suffer or not be able to advance as much because of the source of labor that was taken from one place and stored into another. So Black history is American, United States history, and it's important to know that, to understand that. So yes, I have actually some African proverbs, right? I have some proverbs that I want to go over. So here's one. An army of sheep led by a lion can defeat